Elaine Chao is the nation's 24th Secretary of Labor, representing a new generation of American leadership. Since her confirmation by the United States Senate on the 29th of January 2003, she's been dedicated to carrying out the Department of Labor's mission of inspiring and protecting hardworking people of America. She's respected as an effective, articulate champion of the nation's contemporary workforce, acting quickly to focus the Department of Labor's concerns on the modern realities of workers' lives. Her previous government experience includes serving as Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation, Chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission, and Deputy Maritime Administrator at the U.S. Department of Transportation. In the private sector, of course, I should mention also she was Director of the Peace Corps, and she was one of the first Americans to personally embrace the people of the former communist bloc into the family of democratic nations, establishing Peace Corps programs in the Baltic nations of Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and the newly independent states of the former Soviet Union. Later, as President and Chief Executive Officer of United Way of America, she restored public trust and confidence after the organization was tarnished by mismanagement and financial abuse, thus preserving the nation's largest institution of private charitable giving. She received her MBA from the Harvard Business School and her undergraduate degree in economics from Mount Holyoke College. She also studied at MIT, Dartmouth College, and Columbia University. Active in many volunteer activities, she has received numerous awards for her professional accomplishments, community service, the recipient of 16 honorary degrees, doctorate degrees, from colleges and universities across the country. Secretary Chao is married to the United States Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. And without further ado, I want to present the United States Secretary of Labor.
Well, thank you, Tom, for that very nice introduction. And I appreciate the plug for my husband, too. I'll let him know. It's great to see the Monsignor here. And it's also great to see all of you. I've got a couple of people from the Department of Labor that I want to introduce you to, and that's Bob Athey, who's the Secretary's rep. Bob is over there. And also Kathleen Harrington. Kathleen is the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, and Kathleen is over there. And we also have Lisa Gates. Lisa is around here someplace. Well, I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to speak before one of America's great civic forums. You know, you have a special tie to the Department of Labor because the Deputy Secretary at the Department of Labor is from Chicago, and he's always talking to us about it. His name is Cam Finley, and he was born and raised here. He told me about the crusading spirit of this club, which helped to make Chicago one of the premier cities that it is in our country. And he's also told me a lot about many of you. And I want to congratulate, obviously, the club on a century of leadership and achievement. You know, there's so much attention these days, even on tax day, that's focused on the war overseas, and it should be. So many young Americans have risked their lives to end a brutal dictatorship in Iraq and to help make the world safe from terrorism and also weapons of mass destruction. It's truly hard not to just burst with pride over the magnificent performance of our men and women in uniform. But I also want you to know that President George W. Bush is as focused on our economic security as he is on protecting our national security. He understands that they are the twin pillars of our nation's strength. We must ensure that our young people, particularly those coming back from defending our country, face bright futures. And the basis of a bright future is a good job and a good educational base. And that's why I'd like to talk to you today about the need to enact the President's Jobs and Growth Plan. As leaders from every sector of this community, you know the challenges that we're facing. Although we are in the second year of a recovery, the economy is still not performing as well as it should. Business investment is lagging, jobs aren't being created fast enough, and the stock market hasn't fully recovered. That's why it's more important than ever for the Congress to enact the President's stimulus plan. It will jumpstart the economy by pumping billions of dollars into the private economy over the next 2 years, and the vehicle to deliver that economic jolt is a across-the-board tax cut for every American taxpayer. The philosophy behind the administration's approach to economic stimulus is pretty straightforward. It acknowledges that a cumulative effect of millions of consumers making economic decisions is what drives this country. The President stated that clearly when he unveiled his stimulus package, in fact, right here in Chicago this past January. He noted that consumer spending accounted for 70% of our economy. Without robust consumer confidence and spending, businesses can't grow, and if they don't grow, new jobs aren't created. By putting more money into the pockets of every American family, the President's plan revs up the engine that powers our economic growth and creates new jobs. At the same time, it delivers critical short-term assistance through extended unemployment insurance and personal reemployment accounts to those having the most difficulty at finding work. Let me give you a few examples of the plan's immediate impact on the economy here in Illinois. By eliminating the marriage penalty, 1.5 million Illinois married couples will see a significant savings on tax day every year. And by increasing the child tax credit, 1.1 million Illinois families would receive an additional $400 per child to spend or invest annually. And by tripling the equipment expense limit, 1 million Illinois small business owners will receive an average of $2,000 to invest this year alone. This last feature is particularly important because small business is the primary engine of growth and the creator of new jobs in this country. Just to bring home the point that the President's package will help everyone, consider this. By stimulating overall economic growth in Illinois, the President's plan will increase Illinois state tax revenues by about $138 million in 2003 and $250 million in 2004. The President's tax cut makes so much sense that Congress has already approved them, but with a hitch. They won't take effect for years. For the sake of America's workers and their families, we need the stimulus impact of the President's entire package of tax cuts right now. And they need to be retroactive so that working families will start receiving checks before the year is over. Now, a big part of the President's Jobs and Growth Plan is his proposal to eliminate the double taxation of corporate dividends. Unfortunately, this is one of the least understood provisions of his package. And that's a shame, because this proposal alone is responsible for more than 40% of the 1.4 million new jobs the President's plan would create. That's approximately 560,000 new jobs for American workers in the next 18 months. The President explained the rationale behind the elimination of double taxation of corporate dividends during a recent trip to Florida. He noted that the double taxation of dividends takes money out of the capital markets. It robs the economy of resources that would otherwise be invested in businesses so that they can grow and create more jobs. And that's particularly important to the Midwest region that we're in now, where lagging business investments is contributing to the downturn in manufacturing employment. In addition, the double taxation of dividends deprives senior citizens, many of whom rely on dividend income, of extra resources in retirement. An estimated 1.5 million taxpayers in Illinois, many of them seniors, would benefit if this provision of the president's plan were enacted. And eliminating the double taxation of dividend income would also have a very positive impact on corporate governance. It would reduce the bias in the tax code that encourages corporations to focus on earnings per share, which can be manipulated, rather than dividends, which are concrete, quantifiable, and real. Now, there's an old investor's adage that the president repeats, and it goes like this: earnings is an opinion, cash is a fact. So the case for the president's economic stimulus plan grows stronger every day. As the most recent Business Roundtable survey indicates, a lot of employers are holding off on making new investments because they lack faith that robust consumer spending will continue. Even as we make progress in fighting terrorism, our economy is still suffering from the aftermath of the devastating attacks on our country of September 11th. The retail and restaurant sectors lost jobs this past February and March. Eating and drinking establishments suffered because Americans cut back on business and leisure travel. Since the attacks of September 11th, the United States has lost approximately 1.6 to 2 million jobs, and this cannot continue. We cannot let this continue. With the president's stimulus plan, I believe that we can turn this around. The favorable resolution of the war in Iraq will help by taking some of the uncertainty out of the market. As our world becomes safer and the summer vacation season approaches, more Americans will be traveling, and this should have a positive impact on jobs in the transportation, the hospitality, and the restaurant sectors. Now, historically, low interest rates have sustained the boom in home ownership, and mortgage refinancing has put additional incomes into the pockets of many working Americans and working families, which is shoring up the economy. In fact, consumer optimism about the economy is on the rise. Last Friday, the University of Michigan's index of consumer sentiment rose to 83.2% from 77.6%. That's far better than expected. But to ensure that the economy continues to recover, we must ensure that consumption remains robust. And that means enacting the president's job and economic growth package. Now, recently, the size of the tax cut in the president's package has been in the news, but the number one focus that we have is on the number of jobs that the president's jobs and economic growth package will help create. A reduction in the size of the tax cut means a reduction in the number of new jobs created. And that's why the president remains committed to the key elements of his plan as originally proposed. Tax cuts are a proven strategy to achieve economic growth. President Bush faced 3/4 of negative growth when he came into office. The passage of his 2001 tax cuts helped to make the recession he inherited one of the shallowest in recent history. Tax cuts worked then, and they will work now because the fundamental principles of the American economy have not changed. As the president has said many times, we talk a lot about numbers in Washington. But as he says, we must not forget that behind the numbers are real people, and that in fact each number is a person. And as the president has said on many occasions, one person out of work is one too many. We will never be satisfied until every American who wants a job can find a job. That's the promise of the American dream, and my job as Secretary of Labor, to help the president bring about the promise to every willing heart. But positive change needs willing allies as well, and also an aggressive plan of action, just like the one that this administration put into place in the war on Iraq. And the president has a comprehensive jobs and economic growth plan that is realistic and that is principled. It is the right plan to win the battle for our economic security, and it is the right plan to secure more jobs for Illinois' working families. So I hope that you'll join me in supporting the plan and also in supporting the president. Thank you so much.
Want to acknowledge some people in the room, certainly the president of the City Club of Chicago, who has given this club a great impetus, Jay Doherty. Stand up, Jay. Virginia,
taking care of something.
Virginia Cox, who is regional manager of the Chicago Peace Corps office. Give her a hand. Okay, we have some questions that have been written from the audience, and let me read the first one. Given the need for economic recovery in time for the presidential election, how can the administration stimulate job growth in the face of Democratic programs?
I love that question. Obviously, I've talked a lot about the president's jobs and economic growth plan, and it is a very important program to grow the economy. The Department of Labor spends an enormous amount of taxpayers' dollars to help people who are out of work. We are an incredibly compassionate people and a compassionate nation. The budget of my department, for example, is about $71 billion. This budget is used to help transition people who are out of work, to help people to look for new jobs, and also to provide training for individuals who are looking for new opportunities. But what's more important is that the economy continues to grow and that it continues to offer new jobs. The president has extended unemployment insurance benefits twice already, on top of the 26 weeks of ordinary unemployment insurance. So for people who are utilizing unemployment insurance, some of them are able to access 54 weeks of unemployment insurance. What we want to do is to make sure that we are helping not only people transition through this very difficult period in their lives, but also continue to promote hope and opportunity, and that's through the creation of new jobs. And that's why the president's jobs and economic growth plan is so very important for our economy as we go forward.
What do you view as a defining issues for the 2004 presidential election?
I think healthcare is going to be very important, and jobs. Unless you miss my meaning in this talk today, it will be about jobs, jobs, jobs. And this administration is very focused on creating new jobs, helping the private sector create new jobs, helping people gain the opportunities that will be allowable and created under new jobs. Let me say a few words about healthcare, because this is an issue of great concern to so many Americans. Healthcare is a number one issue for so many working Americans. And interestingly enough, for the majority of working Americans, for the majority of the people who do not have health care insurance, many are working. In fact, a majority of those who do not have health care insurance are working. Many of them are working for small businesses. The administration has a comprehensive program to help workers, employees, people access quality, affordable health care. And one of the tenets of the administration's proposal is to have association health plans. We want to give people, small businesses in particular, the ability to pool their employee base in a pool that will decrease the cost of health care insurance. And that is also pending before the Congress, and we hope that the Congress will act upon that as well.
Will the proposed minimum wage increase negate tax cut benefits?
The current minimum wage is $5.15. There are various proposals at various times to increase the minimum wage. The President supports an increase in minimum wage with some provision for adjustments to local, regional conditions. But as the economy is not particularly on a strong path right now, there is some concern that increasing the minimum wage at this particular time might be detrimental to the creation of new jobs.
What are you doing to help employment of people and disability? Henry Betts. He's the head of or had been the head of the Rehabilitation Institute in Chicago.
Well, we actually have a leading role, we meaning the Department of Labor, has a leading role to play in disability employment policy. We recently have established a new office called the Office of Disability Employment Policy. It is headed by an assistant secretary. His name is Roy Grizzard, and he was the director of social services and healthcare in the state of Virginia, and he's doing a great job. Obviously, employment opportunities for the disabled community is a major concern for not only this administration, but for all of us as caring and compassionate Americans. And so we want to make sure that there are opportunities available to those with disabilities. The President has a new initiative called the New Freedom Initiative, which will help to provide assistive technology to help people with disabilities to more easily integrate and access opportunities within the workforce and workplace. Interestingly enough, we have a number of new partnerships and new array of joint ventures with the nonprofit sector and also with the private sector to focus attention on the fact that 70% of the disabled community is unemployed. That is much too high. That is unacceptable. So among the things, new initiatives that we have is number one, to build awareness that there is tremendous talent and skill within the disabled community, and that each one of us has a responsibility to reach out and create and let others know about the opportunities that are available. And then with the President's New Freedom Initiative, use the resources of our society, the government, the nonprofit, and the private sector to ensure that assistive technology is available to help people with disabilities. It is a major commitment on the part of this administration. I'm personally very committed to that as well. And let me also say that the future demographic trends portend for a need for disabled workers. The demographic shifts in the next 10 to 20 years will yield fewer workers in our workforce. Our population is aging, more of us will retire, and there actually will be a worker shortage as predicted by the major demographic studies in the next 10 to 20 years. So worker shortage will increasingly become an area of great concern. And that means that we have to reach out more to the elderly who are now dissuaded from re-entering the workforce through a whole host of barriers. We also need to reach out aggressively to the disabled community and to help them come into the workforce. We need to reach out in every way possible to ensure that people have the requisite skills to come into the workforce because, again, all demographics shifts show that our nation as a whole will be facing a shortage of workers in the next 10 to 20 years.
What is your office doing to enforce the Beck decision?
Well, actually, our office is not in charge of enforcing the Beck decision. And for those that are not aware as to what the Beck decision is, let me very roughly explain that if you are a non-unionized worker and you want a refund of your union dues under certain conditions, you can apply for it. This currently is in the courts, and it's a National Labor Relations Act, National Labor Relations Board that administers this.
The Fair Labor Standards Act is an outmoded, unwieldy statute, he says. What are the proposals for change, prospects for change? What are the prospects for recent proposed regulations?
The Fair Labor Standard Act was promulgated in 1948, and rules and regulations emanate from that, and that has not changed in well over 53 years. Think of all the regulations that we have in OSHA, in MSHA, and in so many other areas in which we have seen lots of changes in the rules and regulations, but in this particular field, there's been no change at all. And consequently, many of the provisions within the rules and regulations are outmoded and out of date. For example, there are actual references to jobs that no longer exist, such as a leg man, gang leader, keyhole puncher. It really bespeaks of an era that no longer exists. It talks about very strict working patterns that no longer exist. We now work and live in a very fast-paced, very flexible, 24/7 environment. And so our laws, our rules and regulations must reflect the realities of the 21st century workplace. What is also happening that is of great concern to me is that while we have, as a department, a tremendous amount of enforcement responsibilities for the Fair Labor Standard Act, we find it very, very difficult to enforce a law that is now so ambiguous and so out of date. And so what that means is that a lot of workers who should be protected under the Fair Labor Standard Act are now not protected. And we can't enforce a law because the rules have become so fuzzy, so confusing, so out of date that we can no longer enforce it. And in reaction to that, our department has undertaken the very momentous task of trying to update the Fair Labor Standard Act. We want to clarify the rules and regulations, bring it more into the 21st century, and ensure that we are able to enforce a law, and also that the law is relevant as to who gets overtime, who doesn't get overtime. For another example, right now the rules and regulations say that if you are making $8,000 annually, you are not entitled to overtime. And yet if you are making $88,000 a year, but because of what you do, if you're, you can receive overtime. Well, that doesn't seem to make sense to us. We want to make sure that the most vulnerable of workers in our society are taken care of. And we expect that the clarification of the rules and regulations under the Fair Labor Standard Act will help to protect more low-wage workers and the more vulnerable workers.
Last question. Please talk about the priorities of the OFCCP and also define what it is.
We have lots of acronyms. We have OSHA, OFCCP, we have MSHA, we have ESA. I'm not so sure you want to hear all of the explanations, but this is the agency within the Department of Labor that oversees federal contractors and makes sure that they meet all the rules and regulations and the laws of this land concerning affirmative action. The President has always talked about affirmative access, that we want to provide opportunity and access to individuals. We, of course, are carrying out the law, but as we go forward, we are all looking for a diverse workplace. That is just the reality of the 21st century workplace these days. For anyone that will ignore the talent and the skills that is now so demonstrative and so clearly evident in a diverse workforce is a employer who will put himself or herself or their company at a competitive disadvantage. More and more, we're seeing more diversity at the workplace, and as we become even more active with international markets, the great diversity of the workforce of our country will be a tremendous competitive advantage as we compete overseas.
Okay, we thank the Secretary for being here.